UIC.
Freedom the people of
Hell yeah.
Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah,
Yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road, me say yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road. Ready for broke every chain. Then when you free up the people, levitate. Jamaica member, you ever great. I feel burn up the fire upon every snake. Me give thanks in every way. God still a look down once see we safe. UIC run the road long time. GLP and PMP I sell we out. Till I do the test even though we know the end result. If them coulda kill with them catch.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. Today we're the Money Doctor, and I'm going to be talking to you about why we are poor as a country. We're going to talk about why Jamaica is so poor. I wonder if you have any thoughts or ideas about that. We have been poor for so long that it has become, I guess, a part of our culture. We even, what do you call it now? We kind of glorify poverty, you know. Even our politicians, they specialize in glorifying poverty and fight for which of them love the poor more, to the extent that we've created quite a bit of poverty in the country. So tonight I want us to talk about why it is that Jamaica is so poor. Look at the factors that cause poverty in Jamaica, and hopefully identify the solution. What can we use to combat this pervasive epidemic of poverty which continues to plague our nation? So good evening and welcome to all of you. I'm seeing some of my regular persons on. Ken Francis, Cool Guy, Lion Rule, good evening. So it's a rare moment where I get to come back to back, you know, night after night. But I'm looking forward to us talking about this. Yeah. So let's kick this off with a little video that talks a little bit about the poverty we're seeing in Jamaica, and then we're gonna take some time to look at 15 or 16 factors which are key contributors to the problem. So let's do that now. Let's see if I can bring that up for you to look at, and then we're going to chat about it. So let's see if we can do that here. I think this is it. Let's see. Wonderful. So we're going to do that, and we're going to listen.
Hail from the parish of St. Kingston, 1972, as a young little teenager girl. Things were really good them time there when I just come down. Things good. I could have pay my rent, buy me little food and but no, it worse.
Greater collaboration is needed if poverty is to be eradicated worldwide.
Jamaicans are poorer than they were 2 years ago, with 10% living in extreme poverty.
Go to Coronation Market to buy. Where Coronation is cheap one time when you carry $200 go there, go buy. You can't come back with 2 big bags of something. You go to a supermarket with $300, $400. You can't carry home 2 big bags of grocery. No, that not again.
The things went up so high that when you go to the supermarket, there's no money for you to spend.
Yam go up to $180 a pound. Coronation market. Tomato, $500 a pound. Now we think things will be a little better. We are looking for things now shine. Couple of years now, about 4 or 5 years, we are looking for things shine up and we are go alright. And say things are go down. Things go for the worse. Little sugar, water, and little piece of bread for God with bed. That can't work. All the pit them, we try to get them out of malnutrition. We work hard to give the little pit them when them born. To get them out of malnutrition. And now, in this state here, them are going to get the eat. We are going to have a lot of pit again, madlers. We are going dead for hungry. We are going dead for hungry. We can't afford this system at all. And it now gone away.
Families along the St. Mary, St. Catherine border who are living in squalor.
Last year, like November, the rainfall and it all like tear down. Make something more accommodating, but the funds is kind of low.
Russia and Ukraine are raise oil. Them are raise flour. Them are raise chicken. Them are raise everything now. We want better in this country right now.
The little work and the little pay, it can't suffice nothing.
Jamaican economist and professor Dr. Andre Houghton has been a strong advocate for livable wages in Jamaica.
The minimum wage, when you think about it, it is compensation to motivate those of us with the least amount of skills, education, experience to do work, you know. Gardener, man who does a particular pack of bags at the supermarket, these type of jobs. When you look at this compensation, the minimum that you need to survive. So when you talk about minimum wage, you want minimum wage to live in.
Minister of Labour Carl Samuda announced that effective April 1st, 2022, Jamaica's minimum wage would move from 7,000 Jamaican dollars per 40-hour work week to 9,000 Jamaican dollars. 9,000 Jamaican dollars is equivalent to an American making $54 for a 40-hour work week. The announcement came only a few days after the Bank of Jamaica warned to expect price increase due to inflation. Since the increase, Jamaicans have seen a rise in gas and food prices.
We want better living right now. Better living. Forget when we can live good. Live in peace now we had. Get good feed. We have money can buy good food. We have money can pay we rent. We have money can pay we light bill. But at the moment, we can't pay nothing, you know, nothing we can do. We cannot do nothing. And we don't have nobody authenticate for little poor class of people. Who authenticate for we? Them authenticate for them big friend when they got up a hill. But them can't go in a supermarket. We then check. We then check book on them big money and pay. What we are going to do? We still little small fry. We can't do that with $9,000. But hold on now. God bless United States of America. God bless Canada. God bless England. And the little other country them. We're taking black people, they can work and send little money and little barrel out to give them people. That them can get little money sometime in them pocket. And little clothes. Little shoes and them something there. God bless them country there. Because whenever them country they will suffer with dead worse.
Out of 146 countries around the world, Jamaica stands at 142 with the highest charges. There are only 4 countries, Belgium, Denmark, Bermuda, and Germany, that pay more for electricity than we do in Jamaica.
The youths on the street, they need things to do. They left school, no job. How are we poor people gonna manage? Life is amazing, but things real bad.
Done.
Wow, life is amazing, but things really bad. You notice the lady talk about God bless America, God bless Canada, God bless England. And why she's saying that is because many of us are economic exiles. We had to run away from Jamaica and go abroad in order to have some semblance of decency and a reasonable standard of living. And it's those Jamaicans who have migrated because of the harsh realities here that have helped many Jamaicans here at home to survive. If it wasn't for the over 3 million Jamaicans living overseas, many of us here would dead for hungry, I should say, in the clip a while ago. But why is this so? Why does Jamaica have to consistently be struggling and suffering like this? Why is it we can't have a decent economy? Why can't we provide for ourselves as a people? Why is it that a government that takes in billions and billions of dollars every year from this economy has not been able to find a way to make the economy work for the wider cross section of Jamaicans? Why is it that we here have to be earning, in terms of minimum wage, $54 for a 40-hour week, as opposed to $54 for an hour or a couple hours? It's very serious. And I want you to think about the reasons for it. I saw today where the Prime Minister made a comment that young people are frustrated with the lack of opportunities, the lack of proper housing, the lack of upward mobility here in Jamaica. And because of that, they're looking for overseas opportunities. I'm always amazed that the people who create the problems for us in Jamaica always find it so easy to describe the problem, but can't fix the problem. So now I want us to look at 15 or 16 reasons why Jamaica is so poor. Now, I want you to look at those reasons and tell me if you agree with them and if all of them applies to Jamaica. Because the 15 or 16 reasons I'm going to share with you are for countries in general. Why are poor countries poor and why are rich countries rich? Now, I don't think what I'm about to show you captures everything. For example, one of the significant reasons why the US and the UK and Canada are rich is that they have actually committed crimes against other nations and extracted the wealth of those nations and added that wealth to theirs. So we can't just look at it in a narrow context and say, you know, this country is poor because of these 15 or 16 factors and negate the factors of the colonial masters who have actually unfairly, ruthlessly extracted the wealth of other nations. So we'll look at that. Comment here, Lion Rule says, I'm feeling her pain because I have been there, but it's those countries like the US, Canada, and the EU that ruin Jamaica. Absolutely, Lion Rule. Those countries have played a part in the destruction of Jamaica and Africa in general. But we have a role to play as well. We, in terms of those who have led us over the last, we have had a government now for 78 years. What have we done with that time? What have we done with that opportunity? How well have we managed our affairs as a people? And if you look right across the African world, the world of black people in Africa and the Caribbean, look across the expanse of the different countries where we're in the majority and where we control the government. What is it that we have done to help ourselves? Yes, I know that our enemies are working against us. I know that you're going to have countries that are seeking to exploit you, countries that are seeking to undermine you, countries that are trying to trick you and steal from you. But why can't you have the intelligence to properly manage your affairs? Why does everybody have to trick you? I saw recently where Zimbabwe, who is a country which is in severe poverty-stricken conditions, just unveiled a full parliament building granted to them by China. And they're very proud and they're very happy for this wonderful gift from China. You and I know that it's not a gift. There are many strings attached. And while this pretty edifice is going to be there, like the Prime Minister is trying to do in Jamaica, there will be a huge cost to the people of Zimbabwe, which they're feeling now and will feel even more in the future. And so we need leaders, we need intelligent leaders, smart leaders, leaders who understand geopolitics, leaders who understand what every deal means, leaders who will put the interest of the full population ahead of their small myopic interest. Because what happened, these political leaders in countries like Jamaica and Zimbabwe, they look for the immediate kickback that they can get out of each deal, which makes them wealthy. But the consequences of that to the larger population, they care nothing about. And that is what the people of Zimbabwe, the people of South Africa, the people of Jamaica are suffering from. Leaders who do not care about lifting up the entire population. That is why I have such great respect for Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, because he was a true leader. He did not seek to enrich himself from the office of Prime Minister. He sought to enrich his people. And by extension, he himself also enjoyed a rich life, not with a massive home, because he lived in the same home for his entire tenure in office, a modest home compared to our prime ministers. And he focused his energy and effort on building the country of Singapore so that all the citizens can enjoy a beautiful country, a very safe country, a very clean country, a very orderly country, a very prosperous country where the citizens are highly educated and who are able to grow within the economy based on merit as opposed to based on nepotism or corruption. So I'm going to share with you now a film with about 15 or so elements as to why countries like Jamaica are so poor. And in studying those 15 elements, we can see how we can begin to correct the anomalies, correct the faults, correct the problems we have here in Jamaica. So let's have a look at that now. 15 reasons or 15 causes for countries like Jamaica to be poor. And hopefully we can learn from these. And tell me if you agree. At the end of it, or at points where I pause, you can tell me if you agree with what was highlighted and if it really relates to Jamaica or not. So let's have a look at that now. Let me see if I can bring that in. 1 second. Here we go. Let's do this. Okay. All right. There we go.
You are watching the Sunday Motivational Video. 15 reasons why your country is poor. Welcome to BAccS.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Hellxers, and welcome back to this week's special take on why your country is falling behind the others. We're fascinated by how many economies are evolving and what hand geopolitics plays in the full scheme of things. So we started asking ourselves, why are some countries poor and why do they fail to catch up to the rest of the world? While researching for one thing's clear, every country in the world is growing, some faster than others. This is important to keep in mind because compared to 50 years ago, even the poorest of the poor have seen some massive improvements, but they are still somewhat behind what's considered traditional Western countries. We began breaking everything down to identify 15 differentiating factors that are slowing these countries down in their race to escape poverty. At the end, we realized how all of these are intertwined with one another and how people are self-sabotaging their long-term growth for temporary gain. Here are 15 reasons why your country is poor. Number 1. A lack of transportation infrastructure. Roads, bridges, highways, tunnels, railways, airports, sea terminals, and more. These are the foundation on which trade is built, and trade is the main driving force behind economic growth. You bring products into the country and you export your own. Transportation is vital to the long-term financial success of any country, and this isn't a secret. These allow people to transport goods throughout the country, to exchange products, and increases the overall ability of everyone to add value. Now you can take your bike, scooter, or car and travel to a nearby city for work that pays better, or sell your products in the market for a bigger profit. You can take your children to school and devices. You can reach the hospital in time. The impact the lack of transportation infrastructure has throughout the economy ripples into almost every aspect of life. Almost every politician in these poor countries always promise better infrastructure, but always fail to deliver it because there's a lot of money to be made here. They offer these high-value contracts to companies that they benefit from, robbing the population twice. Once because the constituents' money end up in the pockets of a few, and then twice because of the potential earnings that a successful program would have generated for the community. If this is the case in your country as well, please like video. It tells us that we're on point with our research.
So tell me something. Do you agree with her assessment? Do you agree that lack of proper transportation in a country, like Jamaica, for example, and in Jamaica, lack of proper transport is a significant factor on having a rich country or a poor country. For example, here in Jamaica, we don't have a very good public transit system. So it's very inefficient to travel from one part of Jamaica to the next. It will take you, for the most part, to travel from, say, Ocho-Rios to St. Elizabeth, where I live, by public transportation could easily take you half a day. From Kingston to here on public transportation, half a day. That is extremely inefficient and cuts into your ability to be productive. It also means that if you live in Hanover, it's hard for you to get work in Kingston. You have to move to Kingston, or uproot your family. If you even have a vehicle, the road network is very poorly maintained, so you have to drive in an inefficient manner, dodging potholes, having to slow down unnecessarily. You also have greater chances of accidents, which again affects your productivity, affects efficiency. So just imagine if Jamaica had a beautiful, well-maintained network of roads, where we had a government that was not engaged in corruption, causing the money that should have gone into giving us properly designed, well-built, and well-maintained roads. Instead, we get poor quality roads, and the end result is we're paying for these roads twice. We have the money taken from us by taxes or borrowed in our name. Much of that money, or some of that money, is stolen. We get substandard roads, which then makes our lives difficult and makes our commute less efficient and creates all kinds of problems for us in terms of even accidents. And so it's really costing us not having good roads. And on top of that, because they're wasting and stealing the money, we don't have roads going into every community. So sometimes you come out of you take a taxi, the taxi can't turn up on your lane because the lane too bad. You understand? So all of these things. So this is a basic area of poverty creation by government simply failing to have proper construction in place. But let's continue with the video.
Number 2. Located in the tropical region. Here's the thing. For a very long period of time, the main economic driver of a country was agriculture. Because of their geographic region, some countries have to deal with a more potent sun, rendering their soil less fertile, leading to fewer carbohydrate-heavy crops, thus low economic growth. The rise of livestock is directly impacted by this. With good agriculture, humans have been able to use livestock to work the fields and breed more of it for protein and trade. Hot climates are a breeding ground for insects like mosquitoes and the famous tsetse fly, which by itself has been one of the biggest drawbacks in raising productive livestock. These bite both animals and humans, making them sleepy and feeling ill. It doesn't help that a majority of these countries are landlocked. Because of the heat, there are no lakes or rivers, which traditionally aid with naval transport of goods as well as providing natural hydration. Landlocked nations need an incredibly effective government to counterbalance this natural disadvantage with infrastructure projects. A good example is Switzerland, which is currently the richest landlocked country. Not only these tropical countries have had it hard, but with the rise in temperature and climate change, things are about to get a lot worse for them. The economic gap between the richest and poorest nations in terms of per capita income is now about 25% larger than it would have been without human-caused climate change, according to a new study from Stanford University. Climate change is helping to make rich countries richer and poor countries poorer.
Okay, so here's another point for us to look at. I found this particular one to be very interesting because what they're saying is countries that are in the tropical regions tend to be poorer countries because of that, which is quite interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it that way, but they make some good points, but I'm a bit challenged with that one a little bit. What they're saying is because you're in a tropical country and you have the constant heat and you have the mosquitoes and you have other forms of pests that can create challenges for your agri sector and so on, which is true. It does, there are some challenges there. But the key thing is if you have good government, all of that is combated by the effective infrastructure and planning. One thing I've observed though is that tropical countries tend to be lazy. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Because there's no winter coming, those who live in the tropics tend to just take it easy. Yeah, man, no problem. And they just kind of live, from day to day to day because they never have to be worried about and preparing for winter. Those countries that found themselves in the colder climates, they have to be very, very careful and plan and organize diligently to prepare for the next winter, because if they don't do that, they will die of hunger because you can't plant or grow and harvest anything in the winter months. So during the summer months, they really work hard and plan, and they also, because of that, invest in innovation and inventions that eventually makes them quite advantaged by these technologies, which then causes them to be in a position to overrun other countries. They're also always looking for more land to expand and so on, and that's why they became colonial countries, So they went off after the other countries and sought to take away their lands and property in order to add more resources to their economies. So you're going to see later on in the video that also countries with a lot of resources, like minerals and so on, are countries which tend to be poor when it should be the other way around. But the explanation is really a bit of laziness, both in the people and in the leaders. So the leaders are too lazy to do what needs to be done because they're blessed with certain advantages. Like here in Jamaica, we're blessed with the tropics. So what do? We lazily enjoy it. We don't try to figure out how to maximize our production because we never have to worry about winter coming. And so our mentality becomes one of just taking it easy. Notice the moment we go abroad, the moment we go to live in one of these cold countries, our mentality begins to change very quickly. Like very, very quickly, we get into the routine of being highly productive, very, very efficient, on the go, while in Jamaica, we tend to take it a bit easier and not work as hard as we should work. For that to happen, you need a government like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, who created a meritocratic society. So he plays things to influence our behavior, influence his citizens' behavior, so that they would be more productivity focused and engage in building their knowledge base, building their innovation skills, building their productivity at every level. We need that kind of leadership here in Jamaica as well, and we have not had it for the past 78 years. All of our leaders have been very weak on these areas. You may have a leader who talks about being productive and talks about improving our productivity, but none of them have really designed a system like we have done in the UIC. They have not designed a system to bring out the best in our people, and that is critical. And that's what we have done. Now to the next point. And do tell me if you disagree. If you agree or disagree, write it in the box. Let me know what you're thinking about each of these points. All right, as we go along. Thank you.
Number 3, corrupt. Here we go into what we presume is everyone's favorite topic, corruption, or why countries never move ahead at the same pace as everyone else. Statistically speaking, the top 20 poorest countries in the world are also the most corrupt. On the flip side, the richest countries in the world are the least corrupt. Why does this make such a big difference? It's because when corruption doesn't exist, the institutions that make up the state run effectively. People end up in positions of power based on merit. Resources are not wasted, and the population trusts the government to make their lives easier and safer. In poor countries, corruption is widespread. It begins in schools, where teachers require small gifts to pump up grades. You can get away with a speeding ticket if you're offering a bribe to the police officer, and even land a high-paying job in government if you pay off the right people. Corruption keeps criminals out of jail and allows them to keep sucking off government funds at the expense of its citizens. Your political leaders are probably living in wealth, but unable to justify how they built it. They use their political influence to protect themselves, and because the judicial system is also corrupt, they get away with it. The population is supposed to be the gatekeeper of corruption, to vote the corrupt out. But in the majority of cases, the population is corrupt itself and doesn't realize that they are trading their future for pennies on the dollar. Many people keep voting in corrupt politicians because of small gestures of bribery or entertainment who are actually paid for by uneducated populations. A common train of thought in these countries is as follows. We know they're stealing, but at least they're giving something back. As long as the population allows this to happen, the country is stuck on a hamster wheel where the population is in what's called the Red Queen's race. They need to run fast just to stay in place. Number 4. Low quality of education. Not only is the education system corrupt, but it's also incredibly outdated.
So I think we all would agree that corruption is a major problem. That is the number one problem in Jamaica, and I would put that one at the top, because corruption causes all the other problems. You know, when you have a corrupt government, it siphons off the monies that needs to go into the other areas of building a good economy. A corrupt government makes corrupt decisions about education, which affects the mental development of our people. A corrupt government causes monies that should have built infrastructure, quality infrastructure, to support the economy, to be less than standard, and therefore undermines the economy. A corrupt government pulls money away from, for example, the police. So we don't end up with the best police officers, with the best training, with the best equipment, with the appropriate skills, and with the provinces. So your police fail, your education system fail, your healthcare system also fails. So corruption to me is the number one driver of all the other problems that are mentioned here in this video or any other. Corruption is at the core of Jamaica's problems, and we have not had a leader or a political party or government that have seriously and in a focused way sought to eliminate corruption. Yes, they have all given it lip service, and in every election, you'll hear them talk about they're going to get rid of corruption, or they will point finger and say who's more corrupt than who. But if Jamaica is going to move forward, we need a new system that will get rid of the systemic corruption that we have in Jamaica. And I must tell you this, poverty is not a problem to be solved. It is actually a system to be replaced. And when you replace a corrupt system, you automatically replace the system of poverty and bring great prosperity to a people. And the next point that they're making here is the point about education. And you'll see how, of course, education affects the people, and the people affects the government, and the government then would do the right thing. But if you have a situation where the government controls the education system and the education of the people, then they are systematically creating more and more of the kind of people that they need to exist to preserve the system of corruption that they have in place. So we're in a vicious cycle here in Jamaica where the government is using the education system to maintain the corrupt system of governance that they have been perpetrating for the last 78 years. Yeah. What is this? Somebody says, watching UIC Liberty TV for about 1 year and about 4 months, and don't vote UIC. Something is wrong with me mentally. Okay, got it. All right, so let's continue now to listen to the rest of this on the education.
Or in some places, non-existent. Teachers are poorly paid, unprepared, have more kids in their classroom than they can handle, and lack the proper teaching tools to do their jobs effectively. All of this leaves the population in a dangerous situation where the blind end up leading the blind. The effects of this strategic deficit are massive. Poorly trained teachers develop narrow-minded populations. What they are taught has no real value in the marketplace, rendering the entire process useless. An uneducated population doesn't stand up for what is right. It's more easily manipulated and allows for corruption to blossom. Population isn't properly trained. They cannot be effective in the market, thus producing less value over time. This is why other countries develop less quickly than others. Intellectual capital is the key to escaping poverty at a national level. In order to increase their shot at a normal life, those who seek education and are actually in a position to improve the country's conditions are forced to leave it, in a paradox that's draining the motherland of the very few people who could have provided the change needed. Even if external aid comes in to help with education, we've seen numerous where computers were donated and ended up in areas where there was no electricity. When the government fails, there's very little help others can provide, and it all starts with how educated the population is. Number 5.
So there you have it. If you think about Jamaica's education system, we fail approximately 70%, little bit over 70% of our students every year. So this cumulative effect of failing 70% every year significantly weakens our country mentally, productivity-wise, and of course, makes our economy, less than stellar. The 30% or less than 30% that passes through them in a way that can be considered somewhat successful. The cream of that crop, for the most part, is going to leave the country shortly thereafter. As you can see right now, because of the poor quality environment and compensation of teachers, right now, a large number of our teachers are getting ready to leave Jamaica to go overseas, and rightly so. I cannot blame anyone for leaving Jamaica. I cannot blame a single person for wanting to leave this country because of the condition on which they have to live. Right now, it's a very dangerous place, right? People cannot be comfortable and confident about their safety. It's a difficult place to live, and the roads are bad, the systems are inefficient, the social conditions are not conducive for quality standard of living with your family and so on. And so these, the best among us are going to leave and are leaving and continue to leave over the years. And so this consistently undermines our ability to succeed as a country. A few comments here. They have nothing of significance in their constituency, but collecting all this money they didn't earn. Yes, Janet. What percentage of the blame do you assign to the people? Supreme TV is asking. Good question. Okay, Supreme TV, here's the challenge with assigning blame to the people. Think about it carefully. The Jamaican people in 1944, the vast majority of us Jamaicans were illiterate, innumerate, generally ignorant because of, over 400 years of slavery and colonial rule combined. A few of us were educated, very few of us were educated by the colonial masters in their grammar schools, and some went abroad, like Norman Manley went abroad and studied law and came back to Jamaica. And Bustamante was among the educated but quite street smart. These persons, a bunch of lawyers and street smart individuals and a few teachers and so on, had a chance to shape Jamaica, to think outside the box. They were just as disadvantaged or advantaged as Lee Kuan Yew was in Singapore. Now, how those first sets of leaders led our country sets the stage for what Jamaica would become. Because the people were in no position to question things in any serious way. Just imagine the average Jamaican questioning the Constitution in 1962. They have no idea. I mean, they read a few things. Those who could read would have read a few things here and there. But the vast majority were not informed in any serious way, not highly educated in any serious way. So they were depending to a large degree on their leaders to lead them. That's why I call them leaders. And so the two major parties, with those who formed the leadership of those parties, Norman Manley, Bustamante, later on Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, Hugh Shearer, Donald Sangster, P.J. Patterson, Portia Simpson, Bruce Golding, Andrew Holness, these people are the ones that shaped Jamaica. Now, the Jamaican people were led to believe that what they saw in front of them was the way you should set up a government. That's what they thought. Now, our leaders, they chose to allow the British to dictate to them what system they're going to put in place. And so they followed the prescriptions of the British, which was a prescription designed to divide and corrupt the nation, to make sure that it never rises to a level to be like a Singapore. While the leaders of Singapore, and particularly Lee Kuan Yew, saw what the British were about, saw what the colonial masters were about, and used his head. He never fought with them openly. He fought with them strategically by focusing on ensuring that his people were highly educated. So he did some basic things. He made sure that first and foremost, the Singaporean people had a safe environment in which to learn and grow. So he made safety number one, making sure that the police was well trained, well equipped, and well protected from corruption. And so he had a safe environment. He also understood the value of building national pride. So he created a very clean environment. He had what was called the clean and green policy. And so he made sure that every aspect of Singapore was built on the idea of being clean and green. Remember, Singapore is not well endowed like Jamaica in terms of natural beauty. And he made sure that Singapore planted a lot of trees, cared for them properly, put in a lot of parks. So he made the entire island of Singapore a tourist dream, and of course a paradise for the people of Singapore. So the island was well dressed up, beautifully done. And because of this cleanliness and this security, the people now had the space, had the inclination, had the support to now do their best. And so he followed that up by implementing one of the best education system in the world, so that the Singaporean children would master reasoning, understanding, comprehension, communication, logics, mathematics, science. And so he equipped the Singaporean people to think at a high level so that they could comprehend and understand what he was trying to do and why it's in their best interest to pursue such good governance. Now, our leaders did the opposite. They made sure they created a school system that produces mostly dons. Yeah? And then they had their elite schools for a few elite persons to go to. But the vast majority of our schools were of low standards. Our teachers were of low standards. So you had low standard teachers, low standard school, low standard students, low standard citizens. And then you get the Jamaican society you see today. Lee Kuan Yew did the opposite. He said, let's have high standard teachers. So we have high standard students right across the board, which will produce high standard citizens and create a high quality society. Very simple. So he from the very beginning, safe, clean, educated. And to top this all off, he made sure that the entire plan of Singapore was built around solid public order. They will have no disorder at all in that society. He will not tolerate it. And so they had a strict system of public order. So you don't go and drop anything on the ground, throw your garbage anywhere. No, you're not allowed to do that. You don't chew chewing gum and drop it on the ground or stick it on the chair. You don't put graffiti on the walls. You don't pee on the street. They make sure they have public facilities. Now, that's the kind of leadership we needed if we're going to be a high-quality country. And we've not had that leadership. From 1944 until now, we have not had it. And so we're suffering the consequences of that. So the question is, do we blame the people? No, I do not blame the people, because the people have been cultured and led by their leaders. Now today, the people have the history of 78 years to see and say, this is not working for us. This not work. And so now the people should be at a place now where they can assess and say, we need to change. And they have been doing that. Little by little, if you notice what has been going on, opting out of the electoral process. That is a first step. The second step now is for them now to say, let us take charge of our future by owning the political party and owning the political process. So now take over and own. So they know that they can't trust the other two parties because of their history. And so what we have done now is to create the UIC, to give the Jamaican people a chance now to own the political party, own it and control it, never relinquish control, make sure It is a party which is committed to the purpose of building the kind of Jamaica I just spoke about. Lend it your help by volunteering and donating, fully participating, and then using that as our vehicle to creating this new and better Jamaica that we want. But let's continue on to the next element of why some countries like Jamaica are so.
A lack of privacy and free speech. Free thought, the exchange of critical ideas in public forums, the possibility of exposing wrongdoing, and the need for transparency are what keeps a country self-regulating and efficient. In the majority of poor countries, the media is a tool owned by the corrupt government. Instead of being used to keep the ruling class in check, it's used as a political weapon to discredit, disinform, and control the population's perception of reality. Poor countries have total control over what information the population gets. This type of censorship breeds a feeling of insecurity and fear in the population. The poorer the people, the stronger the control the government exercises over them. This is done through surveillance and through local representatives who get specific benefits if they side with the censor. Privacy is almost non-existent, and people just don't trust one another. Many people are afraid their neighbors could be informants of the security forces, so nobody is taking any chances to speak out against the ruling class. This is why the internet has been such a revolutionary force in the history of mankind. It allowed us to communicate on a global scale and report to the world what's happening. We're always concerned when we see countries trying to limit in any way, shape, or form the population's access to the free and open internet. There are many governments around the world who dislike the idea that people have the option to speak freely, so there are active efforts to cut ties with the global internet and develop their own closed version, closely monitored. We've experienced these limitations firsthand while traveling, and ever since, we've constantly used a piece of software to make sure we're both protected from prying eyes, as well as maintain the ability to access the full internet. This type of software is called a VPN. Super easy to use, and when activated, it hides your online profile by both encrypting your information and making it seem like you're somewhere else in the world. These have become a necessity to anyone who wants to have an unfiltered version of what's actually happening, as well as stay safe. You can go to alux.com/VPN and get a 3-year plan at a massive 70% off from NordVPN, the company we've been personally using for years now, and they've been so kind to support our community and sponsor this segment. Even better, because you're an ALUXer, you're getting 4 extra months for free. It's one of those things you buy now and are good for the future. Number 6.
Now, the question of privacy is very important, and security. Privacy, if you think about it, here in Jamaica, we may think that we're free, we have free speech and all of that. But if you notice, people are afraid of getting involved in the political process because they're afraid of victimization. The media houses that we have, they are normally a part of the partisan apparatus. They're not true journalistic entities that are going to bring you a fully unbiased report. Occasionally, they may appear to be unbiased, but on a general level, in many instances, they are used as a tool of the state, or bear in mind that the state itself is owned by the oligarchs, and the oligarchs are the PSOJ elites who own the media houses as well. And so they use the media to twist the mind of the people, to lead the minds of the people in a particular direction. In fact, you will never hear in the media a proper explanation of inflation, for example. They'll never explain to you exactly what is really happening with inflation, because there's a narrative which they've been told to feed to you, so that you never realize that inflation is generally an act of government a fault of government, a tool of government to rip you off. And by extension, it's a tool of the big banks to rip you off. But you'll never hear proper journalistic report on that to explain to you what is inflation really and how inflation really works, and why is it that, you know, our prices cannot remain relatively stable. And over the course of your lifetime, over the course of your working years, you consistently keep losing the value of your labor each and every year consistently. So many things that we see and hear in society are reinforced by the media, and there are lies that are being reinforced by the media. For example, the media will say to you, you know, third parties can't win in Jamaica, and they'll say a lot of stuff about it, but never explain to you why third parties have a very hard time winning. They should explain to you that, well, because we in the media are used by those who funded the other two parties to block the third parties from being well known by you. We will distort your messaging. We will lock them off if they're becoming too effective or too visible, or we will use the media to discredit them to you, so that you have less faith in their ability to be a viable alternative to what you're used to. And we in the media will continue to make sure that we place before you only the two options which the PSOJ oligarchs want you to see. And we will continue through the media and through the school system and through the government announcements, use those vehicles to channel you, the people, into maintaining the status quo, so that a small number of persons can grow supremely wealthy and the vast majority can remain either poor or the working poor, or what they call a middle class that is, you know, is shrinking. So it's quite strategic. So it's good for us to be aware of these tools that are being used here. Let me take a few more comments. What we have here. Desmond Myrie says, we the people have to be blamed. We did not have any alternative. Now we do so. So out of this local election, we need to elect the UIC. So the point he's making is the people should not be blamed for the past when they had no alternative, but now we have an alternative. We have to take advantage of that. And Janet is agreeing with Desmond on this. I think this is Joy here says, although I have enjoyed the various independence celebrations, there's a serious lack of innovation in the activities and presentation. I think we're way past that, Jojo. I cannot enjoy the independence celebrations. There's no way I can enjoy that. In fact, I can't see how any Jamaican who understand the gravity of what we have been suffering these past years that can spend even 1 second enjoying the independence celebration. For one, we're not independent, and for two, there's nothing for us to celebrate. So Jojo, we have to part company on that. I'm not here to talk about the floats and how they can improve the floats and the trailers and the truck and the costumes. Those are frills that are, as I said last night, they're like the bread and circus of the Roman era that were used to distract the people. So let us not be distracted by these so-called celebrations. We have nothing to celebrate right now when it comes on to independence or emancipation. There's nothing to celebrate. We have not been emancipated. We're not independent. We're not free. And every single day, our government is failing us more and more. Mr. Info says, is it really that hard to govern a country properly with under 3 million people? Exactly. It is not. It is not that hard. They've made it seem very difficult But I thank God for leaders like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, who has demonstrated that it's not hard at all, and we should be able to overcome, all of this. The government of Jamaica says, Ermina, don't even know the amount of people in the country. I understand what you mean by that. Okay, so let's continue now. Let's see the next segment here. One sec.
Lack of information and telecommunication infrastructure. There are mainly two brackets that dramatically accelerate the development of a country: how much quality information is available and how cheaply the population can access it. Luckily for everyone, we're living in the golden age of information. There was never a better time for self-education, and the fact you're consuming this piece of content right now stands as proof of that. As humans, we have an underlying desire to better ourselves because it improves our lives and the lives of those around us. In order for the desire to be fulfilled, there needs to be an affordable way to access it. Prices in telecom have dropped significantly in the past decade. 5 billion people own a mobile phone, and over half of these are smartphones, capable of a connection to the internet. The race between telecom companies has become one of who can penetrate the virgin markets. Poor choice of words, we know, but we wanted to slip this in. Billionaires are pouring money into figuring out how to get as many people online as possible. On top of already existing companies, you have people like Elon Musk with Starlink, a constellation of satellites to provide cheap internet for everyone. Mark Zuckerberg's internet beaming electric drone planes, and the already successful implemented Geo in India thanks to Mukesh Ambani. Although poor countries might not be able to afford the latest iPhone, the drop in smartphone prices has significantly aided progress. We've seen this on YouTube with the astronomical rise of T-Series. Sooner or later, companies will realize that there are untapped markets waiting for them, and once they hit a ceiling in their main demographics, they'll begin building outside of traditional developed countries. Number 7. Weak democracy. First of all, democracy is required to make the cut for this. If your country is ruled by a tyrant, your life, by default, is less than favorable. Now, here's the difference between strong and weak democracies, and you can test it for yourself and your own country. In a strong democracy, people feel strong and in control of their politicians. In a weak democracy, the people feel disconnected from politics and believe they can't change anything. If everything we've touched upon until this point is applied, the population will regulate government. They will protest, vote out ineffective politicians and ideas that matter to them. However, if your democracy is weak, people don't go out to vote because they believe their voice doesn't matter. They don't care about local or national policies. To put it simply, they just go with the flow. This allows for abuse and keeps power in the hands of very few. In a strong democracy, the population is constantly consulted by the government because these people are selected to protect the interest of the majority. A great example is Switzerland, where the population gets to vote on over 30 referendums per year. From budget changes to agriculture to development projects, the population has a semi-direct say in what gets done. If they don't like a decision the government has made, they quickly gather at least 50,000 signatures, submit fast, and if found valid, the country gets to alter the future.
So I see one of the questions that we have here, or comments in the group, is about whether or not Singapore is or was a dictatorship. That's a false narrative. Singapore was never a dictatorship. Singapore was a democracy to some degree. And I say that hesitatingly because I do not believe in what people consider to be democracy. I believe in a republic. Singapore calls itself a republic, and I believe it's more of a democracy and more of a republic than many countries. Singapore, the leader of Singapore, the leadership of Singapore, the what's the name of the party? The PAP, I think it was. they ensured that the Singaporean people had a safe environment, a clean environment, an orderly environment to completely enjoy their freedom to do what is right. So nobody had the freedom to do what is wrong. They did not have the freedom to destroy the environment, to deface public property, to litter. They did not have the freedom to engage in corruption. They did not have the freedom to engage in crime. They were free to enjoy all that life had to offer so long as they did not infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of other people. And so when you hear people tell you about Singapore being a dictatorship, just go check it out yourself. And when you watch those videos, just look at the life of the people in Singapore. Nobody stops them. You never see. Here's all the dictatorships I know about. You always see people trying to leave the country. They're either trying to run away from the country or trying to get their monies out of the country. So, for example, you go to a dictatorship like Cuba, you see persons trying to leave the country in boats or whatever. You don't see the Singaporeans trying to run away from their country. Instead, what you see happening is many people wanting to go to Singapore to go and work in that country because it offers such a great opportunity. So don't be fooled. Singapore is not a dictatorship and was never a dictatorship. And we must really study carefully and not be misled by those who want to direct us away from something good. They have done a darn good job, and we would do well to learn from them if we want Jamaica to be a good country as well. So, yeah, all right.
It's worked incredibly well because people actually care about their democracy. For each of these referendums, well over 50% of registered voters turned out every week. When general elections were held in Denmark on June 5, 2019, 84% of the population came out to cast. The government is an incredible force, but the population is what ends up making a country poor, because the population elects the government. Number 8. Super religious. Statistically speaking, the more religious a country is, the poorer the population. The only valid example is the United States, but even there we can make a case for what counts as religious. So why does this happen? Most religions claim to already possess the truth, thus taking a stance on new developments, effectively taking the country out of the technological race. Secondly, most religions look down on financial success as an individual, but at the same time promise unlimited wealth to those who choose to live a humble life. When you combine these two, it's easy to see how a country traps itself in a belief loop that's meant to keep them away from riches. In many of these countries, having a comfortable life is almost seen as a sin, and those who go through hardships are believed to be earning of respect. If your country has more churches than schools, your country is probably poor. If there are fewer medical centers than places of worship, your country has a belief problem. If religious leaders in your country have a direct say or influence toward politics, your country is being held back. Number 9. The country was under occupation for extended.
Okay, we definitely have to stop it here and talk about this. I mean, I'm sure this must have hit some of us by surprise to see religion as one of the factors. And I 100% agree with that statement about religion. The more religious a country, believe it or not, is the more poor it is. That's just a statistical fact. Whether or not you're a religious person, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or Buddhist, this is a fact. Countries where the people place a premium on religion tends to be poor countries, and the explanation that you give is so right. The problem is we have allowed religion to overtake our ability to reason and think. And I tell everybody all the time that the God I serve is a God of reason. No, it cannot be possible that God has given you a brain and then tells you not to use it. Give you hands and feet and tell you not to use it. So because of the way religion has been brought into our lives, the view that we have of religion, the way it was taught to us, and I'm saying religion in general, but of course in Jamaica, the predominant religion is Christianity. The way that it was taught to us is quite destructive. It causes us to think that we don't need to be highly productive. We see money as a bad thing, even though in the end we became insane, because on the one hand we believe that it's filthy lucre and it's bad, and we develop a dislike for it in our minds, and we say it's evil. But on the other hand, we all have to work for money, and the vast majority of us will do just about anything to get it. So there's a dichotomy set up in the mind which creates the seeds of insanity. Because on the one hand, you don't want to be rich, want to be comfortable. What is that? And on the other hand, you end up now, doing all manner of stuff and all kind of illicit things in order to get money. So we need to have a better philosophy. We need a philosophy that helps us to understand that God wants us to be productive. God wants us to be thinkers. God wants us to be prosperous. God wants us to use all of our God-given abilities to create the best possible outcomes we can here on earth. We don't have to delay or avoid prosperity in the hopes of getting it in the sweet by and by. We must now create on earth, with the time that God has given us now, the best possible environment we can. We can create a beautiful Jamaica that looks like paradise, if you will, that looks like the best tourist resort in the world. We can create a Jamaica that looks like that right across the country. We can have a very, very high quality public transportation system. We can have a very high quality healthcare system. We can have a very, very good education system that makes our people smart, creators, innovators, designers. We can have a very rich country, and we can live a very rich lifestyle honestly, with integrity. We should not shortchange ourselves and allow any philosophy to tell us that we should not seek to have a good quality of life simply because of some particular religious pretext. The point made in this video about religion is accurate, and we should think about it very carefully. Jojo said, when you are removed from your culture, you tend to want to see something about your homeland. I agree that we're not behaving like independent people. Okay, all right. Will UIC build trains? It may not be bullet trains, but we will have high-speed rails. We will have a network of high-speed rails from east to west, with offshoots north to south, fully linked with a bus and taxi service that runs on schedule, that is safe, which is clean, which drives at a reasonable pace, and the people can trust it and depend on it, and it is well regulated to give us the best possible outcome. So we're going to have that under a UIC government. Somebody say question time. Okay, go ahead and write your questions, research unit. We'll take them as we go along. Let's take up the next item now, which is the occupation part, the colonialism part.
Extended periods of time. A big reason why some countries are currently poor is straight up because they were under occupancy and the riches were used to serve the empire. It's easy to look at developing countries like India and wonder why it's taken them so long to catch up. And we urge you to take a moment and look at the numbers. Drawing on nearly 2 centuries of detailed data on tax and trade, it's been calculated that Britain drained a total of nearly 45 trillion US dollars from India during the period of 1765 to 1938. This is the type of budget that could have been used to deliver value and infrastructure to the population earlier on. The same thing happened in the Balkans with the former communist countries. The government sacrificed the population in order to begin complex national projects. The regime eventually fell. Projects were never finished, ending up privatized and sold off as scrap metal. Number 10. Paradoxically, the country is resource rich. There's this thing called the resource curse. It's why some of the richest countries in the world from a natural resource perspective end up being so poor. Great examples are seen in Venezuela, Guatemala, and all across Africa. Countries who are mineral rich end up devalued, in chaos, and more corrupt. But how can this be? It has to do with the force of technological process. If you don't have natural wealth, you need to invest a lot in research and development to create new technologies in order to generate value. In the case of really rich countries, there is little to no effort involved. Usually, the government will happily trade raw, valuable materials in a direct exchange for cash. Then other companies or countries are doing all the work and making most of the real profits. Because the nature of the transaction is so simple, it allows for governments to be unsophisticated, which in turn brings corruption. It's in very few cases where leaders actually understand the real value of their resources and that it's worth to invest in exploiting.
Let's take a few questions here and comments as well. They're talking about resource-rich countries, and Jamaica has bauxite. That's one of our mineral resource that has been extracted over the years, and we have failed to properly manage that resource. In fact, left to me, we would avoid going that route, because Jamaica is far more valuable with its land left intact than us depleting our land resource and destroying other aspects of our ecology in order to extract this. Of course, the colonial powers want this resource, and so they would do just about anything to get their hands on it, because Jamaica is a key supplier of that resource for years. But again, if we were going to extract it, we should have, over that period from the 1970s until now, we should have invested in the technology to be able to do our own processing so that we can actually be an end product provider. But outside of that, I think our best bet would be to protect our land, preserve our land, preserve our ecology, preserve our water table, and make sure that in the end we have a Jamaica that can be transferred from one generation to the next intact. Bauxite is a non-renewable resource, and we have no business our small amount of land for that short-term benefit, which really doesn't even benefit us as much, because it's causing, it's damp waterways, it's killing off our ecology, and it's poisoning our people in so many different ways. I see a question here as well. Will it be privately owned? Don't trust government because they make monopolies. So 20 Kevron is asking if the UIC's plan for the public transportation system will be privately owned. No, it won't be privately owned because of the nature of how small the market is and how important that is for us to be efficient and effective. So it will be one of the industries that the government plays a key role in. But remember, not a government that's operated on the current system, which would mean complete disaster, but the UIC system, which has proper checks and balances. So it will work out for us on that one. 20 Kevron asked, did communism and socialism devastate Africa after colonialism? Absolutely. Communism and socialism are absolutely destructive. not in their intent, but in their outcome. So the intent is laudable. The intent of communism and socialism is to say we're going to own all things in common. When you try to make us own all things in common, what you really do is you cause the government to own everything and we the people own nothing, which makes us slaves of the government and sets up serious problems for the people. So communism and socialism is not workable. They're unworkable, but they're laudable. They have good ideas. So they're good things. They're partisan that you need. So anything which is best done by the government should be left in the hands of government. And anything which is best done by private citizens, ordinary citizens working individually and sharing and trading with each other, that should be left with the people. So you have to be very careful and clear about what are public goods and what are private goods. And then you make sure the government takes care of the public goods. So for example, roads that we have to share, that all of us have to share. Nobody should own the private road because then you can have a problem like the toll roads, right? So what you want is the government to be responsible for good quality public roads that we all share. That is a social good, a social product, socialism, if you will, in that sense, because we're all going to share it and own it in common. But you own your own yard. So when you turn off the road, that space now is your private space, which will give you certain incentives and motivations to work and trade. The street lights, a public good that is there for all of us to share equally. None of us should have to pay individually for the street lights, since all of us will share the street lights, and so on. But food is a private good that you consume by yourself. When you eat your piece of chicken, is you alone eat it. It goes into your mouth and goes into your stomach, benefits you. So the chicken is your private product. You go and buy your private chicken. So the government shouldn't be providing chicken. That's something that many persons can produce and many persons can buy and they can eat and they trade value for value. So I'm a shoemaker and you are a chicken farmer. I sell my shoes and use my money to buy your chicken. You sell your chicken and use your money to buy shoes or whatever. So those private things are to be left in private hands, while the public things that we need must be run efficiently and effectively by government. And so you have a good mix of public goods and private goods and services, and that makes for a very healthy society. But as soon as the African countries left, got their so-called independence from the colonial masters, they quickly rushed into trying to set up communist and socialist societies, which undermined the people's productivity, their mental development, because they became dependent on the state. They were being told that the government was going to give them everything. The government was going to think for them, produce for them, and make sure they're okay. And that creates a very bad mindset, which, for years and today continues to plague many of those countries, including Jamaica. So while the intent is good, don't get me wrong, the intention is good, you have to focus on the impact. So when I look at policy, I don't look at the nice sounding intention of a policy. I focus on what will be the impact of this policy based on human behavior, based on the laws of economics and the other laws of nature that we have to deal with as well. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, lots of comments that I'm missing. Jojo said, I was raised with a religious background also. We're taught to not store up treasures here on earth and to wait for our reward in heaven. Jojo, yes, I agree with you. That was not a very good teaching in the way that people have come to understand it. I came to check out your leader for a few minutes, says Dalton Torga. Jojo said this is progressive. 20 Cameron says, do I need a permit to farm in my own backyard on the USC? Absolutely not, Kevron. When the UIC is elected, you own you. The government will no longer be the owner of the people. The people will own the government. The role of government will be to protect your sovereignty. And your sovereignty includes your life to do with it whatever you want, your freedom or liberty to do with it whatever you want, and your property to do with it whatever you want, so long as you do not use force or fraud to infringe on the life, the liberty, or the property rights of anyone else. So that's the key. You do not use force or fraud to infringe on the property rights of anybody else. Yeah. So we have some people here that are bombing the live, so we can make sure we delete them, please, Naika, and block them from doing what they're trying to do here. All right, let's continue with the
Putting it themselves. Canada and Saudi Arabia are both great examples, although different in long-term strategy. Number 11. Money is leaving the country. Building on the previous point, if you think of a country like a business, if you want a country to be rich, you need more money coming in than what's going out. Either through export of goods or intellectual capital, a country needs to figure out how to create more value than it costs to run. The excess capital will be used to make everyone's lives better as a result of the good management of the GDP. In the case of poor countries, they don't generate value. They're consumer-focused, and most of that consumerism turns profits for multinational companies. Take a moment to look at your national economy as a whole. Remove the large portion of the population, one form or another, working for the government. Then remove those who work directly or indirectly for a company that was not established in your country. What you'll see here is your left a small population. Even agriculture these days isn't done by locals. From a development perspective, most developed countries have shifted from a production-focused economy to a technology-driven service one, a big exception being China, who's basically become the factory of the world, followed closely by India. In order for a country to become richer, it needs to create value internally or get value from other countries to deploy it effectively in their local economy. Number 12. Nepotism. Let's imagine you're in charge of running a very important project. List of candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring the most qualified individual, you give the job to your nephew, who's never worked a day in his life. Not only does dear old nephew blow the entire thing, wasting valuable resources, but you're also losing the potential growth a successful project would have generated. Nepotism is a deadly disease for fragile countries. It doesn't mean only hiring blood relatives, but also people who are from the same team as you are, either politically, religiously, racially, and so on. You're probably well aware of families who have amassed big fortunes from either working for or with the state in projects that were poorly executed, if executed at all. There's a great quote from Daniel Alarcon that goes like this: "Nepotism is the lower and least creative form of corruption." People feel entitled to success and a great lifestyle without balancing it with other value. Nepotism is basically theft.
Yeah, I hope you all agree with that. I mean, that's just such a basic problem that we have in Jamaica, nepotism. But let me jump to questions I see here. I think somebody was saying that Kamari Campbell said, business is the solution for problems. How do we get this across to people? Every problem has a business solution. Excellent point, Kamari. You are a brilliant scholar. For the most part, if we just allow the Jamaican people to innovate and create, they will solve almost any problem we have in society. You know, if the government were to focus on its job and just make sure that we have a safe environment, a clean environment, an orderly environment with a solid education system, an anti-corrupt government, you would see the Jamaican people producing far beyond anything you have seen so far. Just brilliantly done. But our government continues to be a stumbling block in the way of the people. To your point, Kevron, or your question, 20 Kevron, will farmers need a license as well? And the answer is no. The UIC is going to get rid of most of the impediments to you pursuing, if there's any form of licensing or whatever, it's really just a matter of registering, just so that we know who is doing what and can be able to respond to whatever issues. For example, anybody trying to steal your products or whatever. So the system must be designed to help you, not to interfere with you and cause you to not be able to effectively do what you want to do as an individual. As long as you're not engaged in using force or fraud to infringe on the life or liberty or property of anybody else, you must be free to go about your business. And that's how we're going to open up the Jamaican economy and really cause things to move. Now, Dalton wrote, Mr. Patterson lost me a few years ago when he stated that Jamaica will be so rich that we will have to import helpers to do manual labor. Well, Dalton, I'm sorry that I lost you on that, because it's a very, very important statement. You probably don't know this, but right now Singapore, which was a really backward country, poor and ugly and dirty, today they have to be importing manual labor. They have to be importing low-skilled labor because their citizens are so well trained, well educated, and highly productive that they are not available to do the low-skilled work in the community. So they have 6 million, nearly 6 million people, and the vast majority of those people are engaged in very high-skilled, highly productive forms of work. Now, if Singapore can do it, we can do it too. I know it seems impossible now because of how bad we are. That's the thing, when people get used to it, it's like you being in a smelly environment. And the longer you stay in the smelly environment, you don't even recognize anymore how smelly it is. You have some people living in some dirty environment. I have noticed that some Jamaicans cannot enjoy clean spaces. As soon as they enter into those spaces, it becomes dirty. They just dirty it up because that's the norm. That's how they have been living, for all these years. So they're not used to cleanliness, and so you give them a space, a workspace, an area, and say, here, use this space, and they'll just quickly make it look like a garbage, bin, a pigsty. So I understand how difficult it might be for you, Dalton, to think that Jamaica could be as successful as Singapore, where we have raised the level of our citizens so that the low-skilled work that is left in our society, our citizens, we won't have enough of our citizens to do that because the vast majority are well-educated and highly productive. So sorry it affected it the way it did, but it's a great aspiration that has already been achieved by other nations, and so we can do the same. Yeah. Unless you don't believe in our ability to do great things, but I do believe we can. Yes. Let's see here. What else do we have? Yes. Bauxite will be finished in 30 years. I don't know the exact time, but definitely it's not renewable, so that's for sure. Mr. D, think big and encourage others to think big also. Good advice, Big John. Thank you for that. 20 Carebrand, love the responses. Been reading up on farm, very healthy venture and lucrative. Absolutely. Jamaica can be extremely wealthy from farming. We've done it before. When the colonial masters were in charge of Jamaica, that's what they made their wealth from, farming here in Jamaica. It's only when we take it over, for some strange reason, we can't make it productive. So we're gonna, have to step it up. I see here Somebody says, where are we? Hey Dalton, Mr. Patterson was just projecting, but we can fix the system. The country can and will thrive as long as we believe. 20 Cameron says, I believe in the UIC vision so far. Jojo said that water would be a better thing to export than bauxite. Jojo, 100% agreed with that. If I had my way, UIC would be governed in Jamaica now, said Trudy and Mackenzie. Good video that you shared. Dalton said, what is your, Jojo is asking Dalton, what is his solution? Mr. Patterson, are we able to take back our central bank legally? Yes, we can, Supreme TV. We can and we will. Kamari, not until I left Jamaica before my eyes were open. Jojo said the problem is with the people of Jamaica also. Why are we sitting around and waiting for Mr. Patterson's action? What can be done starting now? Jojo, that's it. I wish everybody would just jump on board and help us to fund the UIC so we can fund our candidates to go across the island. Every day I'm being asked to be out there on the road. They don't understand. You can't go out on the road and hungry belly and no gas and no money to repair your vehicle and no money to pay your mortgage or your rent and no money to send your kids to school. So we need funding from the people who want us to represent them. So if Jamaicans want us to provide an alternative, it's not going to happen by wishing or praying or hoping. It's going to happen by all of us giving to the cause. So I have given to the cause and continue to give to the cause. I've given myself, I've given my money, I've given my time, my life. I have put my family at risk, all kind of stuff. So I've given as much as I can possibly give. And all I ask is for all of us to do a little. So if all of us were to give $1,000 a month, yeah? If some of us were to give $25 US a month, so say if some give $10 and some give 25 and some give 50 and some give 100 and some give 500 and some give 1,000, if all of us did that, then the UIC could be doing all the things people want to see us doing. But we can't do it without you funding it. There's no way for us to do it. The other day I drove to St. Anne's Bay Hospital to assist a Jamaican that has been unfairly treated by the hospital. And I went out there and helped to rectify the situation. That's $10,000 in gas, plus half a day, well, it actually turned out to be a full day away from work. So, when you see the other persons out there, they're getting taxpayers' money. Right now, we the taxpayers are paying Andrew Holness and Mark Golding to trick us. So they're getting our money. They're not depending on a donation from me and you. They're getting our tax dollars to be out there going around fooling us with the help of the PSOJ oligarchy who is funding their parties to the tune of millions of dollars. So when the election is called, for example, in the last election, both of those parties got $300 million from the PSOJ oligarchs. $300 million for a few weeks of campaigning. Yeah, $300 million. How much do you think the UIC is going to get? Zero. That's what we're going to get. Zero. So if we, the people, don't get agitated and activated and engaged, we don't need all that money, What we need is the engagement. So if we just give the little that we can, if 1,000 of us gave $25 a month, that's one of our target right now, to get 1,000 persons giving 25 US. That is a big way to help us to be able to engage in the way that you want to see us engaging, because it's not easy. When you see a little blogger doing it, a little blogger running up, it's one man, and when use $5 or $30, he will just eat that for himself. What we're talking about here is a full organization. We need to have staff. We need to have research assistants. We need to have offices. We need to have support for our different candidates in the different areas. We need to have transportation and all kinds of stuff. So it's not simple. You know, we have to really step up if we want this to work. Anyways, what else do we have here? The taxes. The government taking half right now. That is a highway robbery. Absolutely Kevron. That is why the UIC's tax policy is to cap the government at 10% income tax on income from all sources and 10% GCT on all transactions. And what that will do, the government will not be able to raise tax. We're going to codify that in the Constitution. They cannot increase their taxes after UIC has changed the Constitution. They can reduce it, but they can't increase it. So the maximum 10% tax. And then taxing the two objectives. The 10% income tax is going to be focused on providing all of the core public goods and services, that is non-private services. And then the 10% GCT is going to be used to fund education, healthcare, housing, and save for natural disasters and also for the environment. So that will be a package here that will ensure that we eliminate poverty, create and maintain a safe environment, and have a cushion in a kind of sovereign wealth fund to protect the nation against any major shocks that may come. So it's well costed and will be a beautiful solution for Jamaica. Mr. Patterson, please tell what are the goods in communism? Well, there's no good in communism in terms, because communism is a system whereby the government owns everything and the people own nothing. So there's no good in that. But the intention of communism was that the goal is to create economic equality. So the intention is good, but it's flawed, and the methodology is counter to respecting the individual rights of people. So I can't point to any specific good except the general idea. Those who coined it because of the unfair treatment to the working classes and the working masses by those that before, who were the oligarchs, who had control and were evil in their relations to workers. The solution, though, wasn't for us to go communism. The solution was for us to have good governance. Similarly for socialism, the same thing. The idea is rather than having government owns everything and the people own nothing, which is communism, socialism saying the government will be able to regulate and tax the people in order to create equality of outcome. So economic equality among us. Now that only leads to massive corruption. And Jamaica has been following that model since the 1940s, 60s. Whether it's JLP or PNP, they have both been following a socialistic model, which gives a lot of power to politicians over the common people, and then by extension allows the oligarchs to buy the politicians and then trick the people and corruptly steal from them while claiming socialist policies that will help the people. So again, the intention is good. So the intention of socialism is good. The intention of communism is good, but want us to look at the impact. Don't get caught up with any policy based on its intentions. Look at the real impact. What will be the actual or likely outcome of such policies? For example, take the NHT. The NHT is a lovely sounding idea. It's a beautiful intentional policy, which is to provide housing for the poor. But what has the NHT been used for? It's been used as to get votes, but in the end, it only provides housing for 25% of the contributors while stealing from the other 75% of contributors. So the intention of the NHG was good, but the impact is not as good as was intended. So the UIC has a different model. We're going to scrap the NHD, and our model will simply say every Jamaican must be a property owner, and we must have generational wealth created through this property stream. So once you're born in this country, you're entitled to be a property owner. You're entitled. So there'll be no more crown lands. You will be on title. Either, so when we take office, all the adults in Jamaica, based on their family circles, will be granted a house based on the Singaporean model, which brought their housing stock to 92% home ownership rate. In Jamaica, we're about 30%. So we're going to fix that. We're going to bring Jamaica to 98%. So 98% of Jamaicans will be a homeowner under the UIC model. This is going to create a massive housing boom, create a great stability within our economy, and pull the vast majority of Jamaicans out of poverty and create a long-term settling of wealth in this country by combining home ownership with a policy of making all of the land in Jamaica the property of the Jamaican people, not the government, the Jamaican people individually having shares in the land, and that the land be mostly used for organic farming, which means we're going to follow Singapore and have mostly high-rise buildings and use most of our land preserved for high volume, high quality organic production, similar to the Netherlands. So we become the leading producer of organic food in the world and exporting this. This will become our oil. This will become our gold. And so the Jamaican people have a steady source of income, even if they don't lift a fork. Those who are skilled and competent and wanting to be in the agri sector will have the jobs and have the opportunities there, while the rest of us who are doing something else, whatever other service or production, will benefit from the dividends from that arrangement and have a house to show for it in the process as well. A nice condo, or if you want, you can sell your condo and build your house or buy a house somewhere else. But for the vast majority of us, we will have a beautiful condo, and the vast majority of our land will be on the organic production, giving us food security, energy security, water security, and making Jamaica for the first time since so-called independence, will now have a very high value dollar because it's going to be backed by a high degree of productivity, and our exports will be greater than our imports in the process. Lots of talking there, running out of breath and time here, but let me now skip back to the final piece of this and get it going.
13. Low social partition. What is a country if not the sum of all the people, their behaviors, their memories, and beliefs, all wrapped up in a beautiful burrito flag? You know the saying, be the change you want to see in the world? Yeah, you've seen your auntie share it on Facebook because it's the truth. If you don't have water, your country is poor. If you have to burn the trash, your country is poor. If you throw the trash on the street, your country is poor. If the park in your local community ruined, it's because you're not taking 30 minutes out of your day to fix it. In poor countries, the public's entitled. They're arrogant in their misery. Everybody wishes that things could be better, but nobody is willing to pick up after themselves. In rich countries, not only does the government run effectively, but the social class is making an effort to improve their own communities. People are organizing themselves in marches. They rise up for causes they believe in and take responsibility for themselves and for their neighbors. There's a super interesting phenomenon called a tipping point, which shows how small acts can take a shape of their own and ruin a community. Small things like not fixing a broken window or covering up graffiti shout out into the world that small crimes are acceptable. These lead to bigger and bigger crimes until you finally hit a tipping point. We learned about this tipping point from Malcolm Gladwell's book with the same title. It's a short and great read or listen, and we strongly encourage you to pick it up. If you go to alax.com/freebook and sign up, you can download the audiobook version for free, courtesy of our friends at Audible, who are so kind to support our community. Number 14. Poor medical infrastructure. Here's the deal. Access to proper medicine is a must. While trying to research this point, we focused on Africa. Approximately 1.6 million Africans died of malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV-related illnesses in 2015. These diseases can be prevented or treated with timely access to appropriate and affordable medicines, vaccines, and other health services. But less than 2% of drugs consumed in Africa are produced on the continent. Over 80% of the African population relies exclusively on public health facilities, which are almost non-existent outside of major cities. A great indicator for this is called hospital beds per 1,000 people. The minimum index where a society is protecting its population is 1 bed for every 1,000 people. High-income countries are averaging a little over 4. Germany has 8.3, Belgium 6.2, China 4.2, and Brazil 2.2, just to name a few. Looking at the other side of the coin, Sudan has 0.8, Uganda 0.5, Venezuela 0.8. If people die from diseases, they don't generate economic value. They fulfill their dreams, and their journey toward leaving behind a better world than they inherited is cut short. For a country to be rich, it's required that treatment for all diseases be both accessible and affordable. God forbid you break a leg in the US or discover any type of disease without being insured. Countries where healthcare is both effective and accessible are growing richer in the long. Number 15. War and civil disputes. We couldn't reach the end of this piece without talking about war and the impact it's having. Rich countries haven't had to worry about war for over half a century now. Meanwhile, there are entire countries torn to shreds where the population is suffering. Wars are a major cause of poverty, underdevelopment, and ill health in poor countries. They often have cultural dimensions related to ethnicity or religion, but there are invariably underlying economic causes as well. Major root causes include political, economic, and social inequalities, extreme poverty, economic stagnation, poor government services, high unemployment, and environmental degradation. We left war as the last item on this list intentionally because countries performing well have no incentive to go to war. They find themselves in a gridlock zone of economic development where everyone around them is doing great and growing. It's both the government's and the community's job to promote inclusivity, to reduce inequality in groups, to make sure there's a workplace available for everyone, and stop corruption and illicit trade. Because at the end of the day, we all want to live better. We want our children to grow in a world where there's plenty of opportunity and resources, where they are treated fairly and can live with dignity, knowing we've been a valuable member of society. With all this said, we're super curious to know where your country is falling short. We have such a wide range of members in our community, and we'll learn from you what signs and reasons you see for your country underperforming.
Yeah, so there you have it. 15 reasons why any country, and we've been talking about Jamaica in particular. I saw someone said that Jamaica is not Singapore and it will never be. And they reflected or commented on the fact that our cultures are different. I think the person probably need to go back and take another look at Singapore. The culture of Singapore today is very different from the culture of Singapore in 1965 when it became independent from Britain. You might recall that we became independent in 1962. So 3 years later, they became independent of Britain. At that time, they were a very fractious society, divided by language, divided by religion, divided by race, and were quite transient. They did not see themselves as a country. They did not see themselves as belonging together. And they were quite dirty, crude, and backward. And their leader, or the person who emerged as the primary leader together with a team that he assembled, set about. So the Singapore you see today is as a result of the leadership of Lee Kuan Yew and those who helped him form the PAP. At the time when they were doing this, it seemed impossible. But within one generation, they did the impossible. They turned a backward third world country into a first world country in record time and changed the culture and behavior and habits and mindset of the people into a cohesive whole by policy. They had great policies, policies concerning language, policies concerning housing, policy concerning policing, policy concerning education, and by policy and by good governance, they were able to create one of the richest countries in the world. And you might recall that back in 1965, their GDP per capita was about $550 per person, which was identical to that of Jamaica. But since then, they have by far outstretched us with less resources. They have no serious natural resource. We were very blessed compared to them with natural resource, very blessed in terms of being more of a monolithic society and having, all the advantages you can think of. We were just next door to America. We're in a very strategic location. They also had a strategic location, but we had it too. And we were just next door to the richest country in the world. So we had all the advantages to do well. And they had one or two advantages that they inherited from the British. And they could have destroyed it or turned into something magnificent. We chose to do the latter. They are strategically located in where they are in Asia. They could have failed to optimize that strategic position. They optimized it, and as a result, benefited from it. We in Jamaica have failed to optimize any of our strategic positions in the international context and in the local context. So culture is a result of governance. Culture is as a result of leadership. And so the culture that you see in Jamaica today was not the culture that we had in 1962 or in 1944. That culture is gone. The culture has changed over that period, and it was changed by our leaders and their stewardship of our country and economy. The Jamaica you see today is the culture created by the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party. And when the UIC is elected, we shall reverse that culture. We will change that culture by providing a different kind of leadership, a better system of governance, and help the Jamaican people to realize their full potential. Well, let me take some more questions if there are any. Naika, can you help me with some questions? I see here Supreme says, your first month in office, how would you encourage Jamaicans abroad to come home and invest in Jamaica? Very good. First and foremost, in my first month in office, we're going to pass a new law that allows all Jamaicans living in the diaspora to return home if they so wish, 100% duty free. So they will not have to pay any duty at all to come home to Jamaica to bring not their household belongings, but their business assets as well. So if they want to move an office, whatever it is they want to bring home, tools, equipment, everything they need to bring home, well, they can do so 100% duty free. On top of that, we would also extend the right to vote remotely to all Jamaicans living anywhere in the world. So once you're Jamaican, you should be able to vote via absentee ballot, preferably electronically, which we, of course, will have to make sure proper safeguard. But we're going to make sure that Jamaicans abroad are able to fully participate. We're also going to remove the laws which says that you can't run for office if you come from certain countries. So, for example, right now, a person who is a citizen of Canada or Bangladesh run for office in Jamaica, even if they still retain their India, Bangladesh, or Canada citizenship. But a person who has the U.S. citizenship, they're not able to run for office here in Jamaica because of a ridiculous law that talks about Commonwealth. So we're going to replace that immediately so that we open up Jamaica. We want to create a very inclusive Jamaica. We want to expand the idea of Jamaica to be not just you living here in the country, but once you are Jamaican, you are to be fully respected and protected and included in the whole process of creating this great new Jamaica that the UIC wants to create. Next question. How will we ensure no corruption in the judicial system? All right, so very good question, Mr. Romans. We cannot ensure that there are no corruption in the judicial system. What we're going to do is to mitigate the possibility of any corruption. So first and foremost, the appointment of the judiciary must be changed. So we're going to change it so that the appointment is made the same way that we're going to appoint ministers of government. They will be nominated by the executive branch, vetted by the Senate, which will be an elected Senate in our situation, an independent Senate as well. And then they'll be voted in or out by the House of Representatives. We're not going to give any judges lifetime tenure anymore, but rather their tenure will be based on the review of all three branches of the House, which is the executive branch, which will now be and the Senate and House, which are independent of each other. So you'll always have proper checks and balances between them. And of course, the citizens will now have true representatives in the House because of the way we're going to structure it. So you're going to have a more dynamic and more accountable and more effectively a more effective check and balance system to ensure that we have good justices and that they're held in check by the system. Next question. Okay, will the UIC abolish the central bank system, the money printing? All right, so the UIC will take a number of steps. First, the Bank of Jamaica, which is fine to have a Bank of Jamaica, but we're going to abolish the principles of central banking, the way that Jamaica and the rest of the world, many countries around the world, have bought into the central banking system where they gradually lose control of their own money supply and cede that to a so-called independent body, which is then managed and manipulated and controlled by an international body, which is controlled by the oligarchs, the global elites. So what the UIC is going to do, we're going to take back the central bank. It's going to become the Bank of Jamaica again, and the People's Bank. But its function will be different. It will not be seeking to manipulate interest rate or exchange rates. and it will not manipulate the money supply. It will act more as a regulator to ensure that there is no force or fraud in the banking system, while creating a free banking system that allows for a number of competing banking arrangements, so that the people are not limited to any one option, and because of the competition in the space, the cost of banking will go down, the ease of banking will increase, and access to banking will be a right for every citizen. It will not be something that a bank can tell you can't have a bank account. They must give you one if you request one. And of course, by having a proper, then that will not be a problem. Most important though, the Jamaican dollar will be backed by the productivity of the Jamaican people and will no longer be something that the government can manipulate at will. It will be formula driven, so that the value of the Jamaican dollar will remain constant over time. So we're not going to be having any inflation target. Our inflation target will be 0%. Of course, you will have inflation, but that must be natural inflation caused by the environment, caused by a glut or a supply, oversupply or undersupply of any particular good or service, which has nothing to do with government. It must be because of the natural environment. We had a bad year this year in farming because of nature. Then, of course, you're going to have an undersupply of whatever it is that will push up prices. But there will not be the counterfeiting that now exists in the debt-based model that currently obtains globally. We're going to extract Jamaica from that system and make sure in Jamaica we have real money backed by productivity, and therefore retains the value of your labor over 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. Next question. Will farmers need a license as well? I answered that one before. No, farmers will not require a license. However, anyone engaged in business will in fact register, but it will be a very simple process, and only so that if somebody needs to take it to court, it is clear, who they should take to court for whatever it is. So it's more just for protection of the consumer rather than another source of revenue and control by the government. So we're going to eliminate the control factor and focus on protecting the rights of citizens factor. Next question. How would you improve the healthcare system? And that's a long story, that's a big one. The long and short of it is we're going to make sure that it becomes customer driven and no longer government driven. Where the government controls it and disconnect the customer from the service providers, which then results in very poor care of the customer. We also have to make sure that the system is not a system that prevents customers from getting the care that they need simply because the government has put a cap on things to create so-called free healthcare. We're going to have a truly public healthcare system with all the options you need, and people will pay for the care that they need. This will bring down the cost. This will bring up the quality, and then the poor who cannot afford it will be subsidized directly. So rather than making our public hospitals poor quality institutions because of government mandates, we're going to make them truly open and public institutions that are funded by the people directly, and then the government steps in to using the 10% GCT that we talked about to fund those who need help. So you'd have subsidized help directly as opposed to creating a system which is overall subsidized and low quality because of that approach to healthcare. Next question. How will the UIC improve our transportation system to be as advanced as Dubai or Singapore? very good question. Basically, we're going to revamp what is there now to create a national transportation board um, with a mandate for an efficient system, which is 100% publicly owned. Uh, and by extension, we're going to eliminate all of the incentives which cause drivers to drive recklessly. We're going to remove all of the incentives for us to have high concentration in some areas and low servicing in other areas. So now we're going to have an evenly distributed system that ensures that we have transportation in all 14 parishes, in all 228 municipal divisions, and, um, and connectivity, so that it's much easier for you to travel from one end to the next without significant delays. And with this buying power, we'll bring down the cost of transportation tremendously and make it cheaper for persons to use the public transit than to purchase cars and drive for an import bill of oil. Next question. Do you believe crime plays a role in discouraging business? Of course, absolutely. Crime is the number one impediment to business growth in Jamaica. In fact, it's the number one impediment for everything in Jamaica. An unsafe environment is not conducive for maximum productivity and retards the country's development in so many ways. It's very costly on every front. It drives up our healthcare costs. It drives up our cost of doing business, and it drives up our cost of living in general. So that must be addressed, and we will address it by having a top-down approach. We're going to go at the criminals from the top. If you eliminate those that are the great facilitators, you'll be able to, affect the rest of the country in a very positive way very quickly. Final question. It's now 2 hours and 11 minutes. So I have to go. Mr. Patterson, in terms of the healthcare in Jamaica, is the single-payer model healthcare system a better model, or is a multi-optional approach better, with Jamaicans having the public option? All right, so the model that the UIC is going to follow is a completely 100% public healthcare system, which means that the government is not going to run the healthcare sector. It is going to be a lot of different private options that will allow the citizens to choose from a number of solutions. We're not going to retard our doctors. We're not going to retard our nurses. We're going to make sure that we have a very, very open and what's the word I'm looking for? Quite a diverse set of solutions and options. And then our focus is going to be not on controlling the sector like we've seen here in Jamaica and in some other countries. Like, we're not going to try to own it as government. We're going to let the sector mature and offer high quality healthcare service, so very high quality. And then now we provide the subsidy directly to the users. So those users who are able to afford it will pay for it, and those users who can't afford it will be subsidized or be paid for. With that being done, you're going to have greater innovation and greater customer care, because now every facility will be competing for customers. So they have to treat you with respect now and regard, because they can't just do whatever they want with you and still get the government's money. The taxpayer will be able to spend that money wherever they want to. So whichever of the hospitals or clinics they want to go to, they will choose based on the quality of care that they're getting and their experience with that service provider. And the government will let the money follow the user. So wherever the customer goes, that's where the money goes. And so you're going to have now all of our healthcare facilities having to really focus on serving the customer or go out of business. So it's going to change the dynamics tremendously. You're going to see the quality of healthcare shoot up very, very quickly in Jamaica. And the poor and marginalized will now have access to better facilities and better care because of this model. Next question. Final question. Honestly, have to go. Yes, there you go. Will UIC subject themselves to the WHO, IMF, WEF, CDC climate change movement? The answer is absolutely no. Jamaica is going to be a truly independent and sovereign country which will make its own decisions. We're not going to sign off on any accord that cedes our sovereignty to any global institution or any local special interest group. The government is going to be there to serve and protect the sovereignty of the individual citizens of Jamaica. We're not even going to apply a collective approach to this. The government is going to exist to make sure that you as an individual have complete sovereignty in your country and with your property. So we will engage in no transactions, in no treaties, in no agreements whatsoever which undermines your individual sovereignty. As far as we're concerned, the collective sovereignty of Jamaica is only as strong as our protection of the individual sovereignty of all Jamaicans. And so we're going to make sure that never again in the history of Jamaica, any organization, WHO, IMF, whoever they are, will be able to control our government and get it to do to you what you do not want. So you must never be forced to take any medication you don't want. You must never be forced into a monetary arrangement that you don't want to be into, and so on. So that's why we're going to engage in free banking. That's why we're going to create a truly public healthcare and education system. For example, in education, you're now going to have many options. So your child doesn't need to go to a Christian school if you're a Rastafarian. You must have the option. If the market exists, if somebody in the market decides that they want to provide a Rastafarian school, a school that teaches the values of the Rastafarian belief system, then that exists. Your child should not be forced now to cut their locks or be forced to participate in a program that worships Muhammad or Krishna or whatever. It must be that you, the parent, the family, gets to choose what it is that your child will learn. Of course, the government will provide a basic framework. We have a beautiful framework which we think everybody will like, but you will not be forced to follow it. So you'll be in a school environment where with a government provided curriculum that is based on an Afrocentric system. So we're going to put the African heritage, the African understanding of the world, the African experience front and center in our curriculum. And then we're going to use that curriculum to ensure that we empower the students on some key areas. Three primary areas: understanding of self, mind, body, and personality, making sure that the child grows up to have a healthy appreciation of themselves, understanding how to develop their minds fully, understanding how their bodies work so that they can take care of their own bodies and they're not at the mercy of the medical profession. They must be able to ask important questions, make good decisions about their health, and they must also have a great appreciation for their personality and develop a solid character. So we're in the business of building good characters. So mind, body, and personality is one. The second one that we want to make sure we develop is the child must grow and understand human behavior, how to build strong relationship with a family relationship, friends relationship, business relationships, international relationships, understanding people and cultures and geographies, and being able to be wise about the world in which they live in, because they have these competencies well developed in school. And thirdly, the child must learn and master the science of money, understand the history of money and monetary system, the politics of money, the geopolitics of money, and understand how money works, how to manage money effectively, the tool of money. And they must not be afraid of money. They must be very knowledgeable of money, so they're not tricked easily by anyone, whether they are politicians or so-called financial advisors. They must fully understand the concept of money, and fully understand the economics of money, and fully understand the importance of trading value for value if you're going to be a worthy citizen in this country and in the world. And with those three fundamentals in place within the context of understanding our African heritage and our world history in the context of the African man and woman, in the context of how that evolved into the Caribbean and the wider society, then they learn the other disciplines, and they must not learn them in silos. So they must learn physics, chemistry, and biology together, and understand how the disciplines relate to each other. And they must learn with the intention to innovate and create and produce, not merely passing exams, but being able to solve real life problems, and to even imagine future problems and create futuristic solutions. They must see the connection between those disciplines and carpentry and plumbing and electrical and electronics. So we want to have a really different kind of thinking, a highly intellectual society. Even if you are engaged in the trades, you must be well developed from an intelligence standpoint, so you can be a great contributor to the dialogue. You must understand good governance, understand the government, and understand the system of governance, so that you can understand the laws and the constitution. So a very different Jamaica, a Jamaica where you know your rights properly, and you can articulate them properly, and you can deal with conflicts properly, and so on. So I know you're going to hear these words being echoed by the current leaders who have destroyed us as a people, but don't be fooled by their sudden awareness now of these things because the UIC is coming. Don't be fooled by that. Bear in mind that they didn't do it for 78 years. And so now they're simply going to find new ways to do what they've already done for the last 78 years. New ways of tricking you, new dog and pony shows, new bread and circuses, new cloak and daggers. So do not be fooled by them. Be aware and know that together we are going to take our country and make it as good and better than Singapore. And yes, I keep harping on Singapore because it's a clear and present example of a country that was a backwater country at the same time when we got independence, and they were able to do in 25 years what these two have not been able to do in 78 years. It's time for us to turn a new page, turn over a new leaf, and move Jamaica in a new and better direction. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been a long one, 2 hours and 23 minutes, but I think it was worth it. And let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed the discourse. Let me know what your thoughts are about some of the points that I raised. And let me know if we have your support. We need 1,000 of you, $25 a month, so that we have the funds to do the things you want us to do on the ground, right here in Jamaica, land we love. Take care until next time, and remember, the UIC is for one Jamaica, united, strong, and free. Take care, and all the best.